Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, True Crime with Jess Rose. Now, hope you're all okay, but I'm gonna crack straight on with this story because it's so in-depth. There's so much detail to it. I want to make sure I get all the facts right. As you know, if you're a true crime fan, the older a story is, the more facts come to light. But also, along with that, you get a lot of embellishment along with stories. So what I've tried to do is have a look at so many different sources on this story and pick apart the ones where it seems like it's just been embellished and what facts have come up time and time again. So I have tried to do that for you. Now, there have been 2 films done on this story, which is when it came to my attention, to be honest, back in 2007. First one is called An American Crime. I won't say an all-star cast, but there are a lot of stars in there. You've got the star from 40-Year-Old Virgin. I can't think of a name off the top of my head. Please don't find me, because she's quite a big star. You've got Ellen Page, as she was known back then. I do know he is Elliot Page now. So don't come at me for dead naming. I have to say Ellen Page because that was his name back then. James Franco's in it. And then there's also another film. Both of these are you can see yourself on YouTube. There's another film called Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door. Now, if you do want to watch it, it is brutal. But make sure you put in Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door, because there are other films called The Girl Next Door on YouTube at the moment. So make sure you preface it with Jack Ketchum. Now, between the 2 films, they got... An American Crime is very romanticised. You get an idea of what this girl went through, but they miss out an awful lot. But to be honest, what happened to her, you need a 6-hour film to be able to get everything in. Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door, much more brutal. Obviously not as many stars in there. A couple of things that aren't factual, but believe it or not, that is more correct in what Sylvia went through than An American Crime, believe it or not. Although American Crime, the names, time frame and everything are more correct. So between the 2 of them, they kind of get it right, but even then, you can't imagine what this girl went through. So I'm gonna try and tell you everything, with everything I'm aware of now, because I've heard this on podcasts, I've heard it, obviously read things online. Now, I try to keep my stories between, say, half an hour and 45 minutes, which I know is a long time anyway. To get everything to you, all the little bits, I'd need to be talking to you for 3 hours. Now, I can gladly do that. Everyone who knows me knows that 3 hours is nothing to me. But just to keep it within my normal time frame of videos, I will fast forward, but all the facts will be in there. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to start with Gertrude. And we're going to start with her because it will lead us into the meeting with Sylvia. Now, Gertrude was born Gertrude Van Fossen on September the 19th, 1928. She was the middle child of 6 children. Now, Gertrude, she was okay. She was a normal young girl, normal family, but she very quickly, from even being a toddler, became a daddy's girl. And her mum, for whatever reason, just didn't like that. she didn't take to it very well at all. So she was quite cold towards Gertrude. Favoured her other 5 children above her. So, which in turn made Gertrude closer to her dad. But when Gertrude was 13, her dad at age 50 died of a heart attack. So the one person in the world who kind of was there for her, because due to her being her daddy's favourite, her brothers and sisters, or was it all girls? Sorry about that, but her siblings didn't take to her too kindly. So she kind of had nobody at that point. So when her dad died when she was 13, everything really changed then, because her dad used to kind of protect her from the coldness of her mum. And from then, yeah, her mum just laid in. Her siblings laid in. Now, because we're going back to kind of the late 30s, early 40s. A woman's name was everything, absolutely everything. And what her siblings used to basically tell everyone at school was that she was easy. Now, Gertrude wasn't. But what she found was, because she was getting no love at home from her mum or her siblings, the lads at school started showing her attention. 13, 14, she'd started to get a bit of a figure on her. She was never really what you'd call a pretty girl. But because she kind of allowed them to do a little bit more than the other girls in class would. She became very quickly popular. Now, when I say that, in today's standards, you would think that meant she was sleeping with everyone. She wasn't. She kind of let them touch her above her clothes, and she touched them. That was as far as it went. But back then, that was, her name was soiled. It was terrible. And obviously when her mum found out, came more beatings for Gertrude. She was having a bit of a rough time, and she took it for a couple of years. But when she turned 16, she'd had enough, and she ran away. Now at this point, she met John Banaszewski. Now, I'm saying Banaszewski because the spelling, it's spelled Banaszewski with a Z. Now, apparently it's Polish, but it's pronounced Szewski. So if I am saying it wrong, I do apologise, but I have looked into it, and it does say that it's to be pronounced Banaszewski. So that's how I'm going to say his name. So she met John Banaszewski. And he was 18, she was 16. They got married straight away. And it started off okay, but Gertrude wasn't she kept the house clean, but she'd never been taught how to cook. She could make a sandwich, but she wasn't what he considered wife material. But they had 4 children, and I like what the name she'd been called and that he'd heard of. She wasn't this sexual deviant that her reputation had put across. So as well as not exactly being the greatest cook, it was said she was catatonic in bed. She only really went through with it to have children, which made her life. She wanted to be a mum. That was her calling, and doted on her children beyond, she loved her children. So like I say, she had 4 children with him, and the marriage, when she was pregnant and when she was feeding her children, it was okay. But then in between those times, like I say, her cooking had got better because she wanted to feed her kids well. But the other side of the marriage wasn't really working, to the point where John started to get quite violent. And it was said that Gertrude just seen this as something you have to put up with, you know. Now, at this point, John had become a police officer. You know, they were living quite well. And like I say, she's seen that to have the children, to have a nice life, the beating was just something she had to put up with. Whether it is because that's what she put up with from her mum, although she didn't actually put up with it, did she? But after 10 years, she'd had enough and she divorced him. He didn't contest the custody of the children, and he just used to pay for his kids, and that was it. Now, she met and married a gentleman by the name of Edward Guthrie, but that only lasted a year because he just didn't like the kids. You know, he'd inherited 4 children. He always knew he'd become a very low second to these children. And it just didn't work out. So a couple of years later, when Gertrude was 29, she meets John Banaszewski, sorry. And he sees in her what he saw when they first met, and the kids are over the moon, and they start seeing each other again, and they get married again. Go on to have 2 more children, but it doesn't take long for the old problems to come back around. You know, she's never really been into the bedroom side of a marriage. You know, she picks and chooses whether she wanted to cook for him, or, you know, whether she wanted to clean the house. She wasn't exactly the poster child for, you know, a married woman, or how a married woman was supposed to be back then. So it lasts for 7 years. They have 2 more children, but it just doesn't work out, and they divorce again. So at age 36 in 1965, Gertrude, or Gertie, now has 6 children. And she does meet a lad called Dennis Lee Wright. It's a very quick thing. She has 1 child for him, and he, as soon as the baby's born, he disappears. So that was a very quick moment, very like the Edward Guthrie. You know, it was all very quick in Gertrude's life. So sorry, now it's 1965. She's 36. She has 7 children. And she's actually living at 3850 East New York Street in Indianapolis. Now, in 1965, her 7 children were named and ages. As I say, like I said, there's a lot involved in this story. So I know there's a lot of names I'm going to throw at you and a lot of ages, but all of these people have so much to do with the story. I have to tell you. If I didn't have to tell you the names, or, you know, they weren't involved as much, I wouldn't include them, but they do. They have a lot to do with it. So her 7 children are as follows. Paula, 17. Stephanie is 15. John is 12. Marie is 11. Shirley is 10. James is 8. And Dennis Jr., obviously not for John Banaszewski, is 1. Okay? So, like I say, they're all living at 3850 East New York Street, Indianapolis. And that's when we hear about Sylvia Likens. Now, Sylvia Likens, she's the middle child of 2 sets of fraternal twins. She's got an older brother and sister, 2 years older, called Daniel and Diana. And then she's got a set of twins under her, a year younger than her, Benny and Jenny. Okay. To their mum and dad, which is Lester and Elizabeth, nicknamed Betty Likens. Now, Sylvia, she's such a pretty girl. She's quite popular. Very close to a younger sister, Jenny. Now, Jenny had polio from a young age, so her one leg was a lot weaker than the other, so she had to have like a frame on it, kind of a bit like Forrest Gump, if you've ever seen it. That's not being harsh. I think that's just how it was treated then. So Sylvia was very protective over Jenny. She looked after, even though there was only a year between them, she was very protective of her. Now, their family for years had worked the carnivals. That's what they did as a family. And the boys, Benny and Daniel, always went with the parents. Obviously, Diana at this point was grown and had got married and moved away, so leaving Sylvia and Jenny. Now at this point, Betty, she didn't want them constantly at the carnivals. I think she thought it was a bit dangerous. And you know what happened, you'll be like, you should have kept them with you. But theirs was kind of, Betty and Lester's relationship was very volatile as well. They had a lot of fights. You know, in an American Crime, it makes them seem like this lovely couple. I don't think it was the sunshine and rainbows that it was made out in the film. And in early 1965, Betty was actually arrested for shoplifting. And she's arrested for shoplifting. So Lester has to go and get her out bail her out. And while all this is going on, there's two stories that go on. Either way, it turns up with Sylvia and Jenny, who, don't forget, because of the carnival, have moved around a lot, but they're going to a high school and going to a church with the Banashevsky children. They're not friends with them, but they just see them, they know of them. And on the bus going home the one day, they get talking to Marie Banashevsky. Now, don't forget, she's an E. I think she's 11. And she says, why don't you come back to our house? Now, also with them was a friend of Sylvia's. And she was like, well, I know them. Come on, we'll go back. It'll be okay. So they go back, and there Sylvia meets Marie's older sisters, Stephanie and Paula. And because Stephanie's got a boyfriend called Coy Hubbard, she gets quite close with Paula. And they're similar ages, like Sylvia's 16, Paula's 17. You know, they get on quite well. So while they're there and they're just listening to music and it's all okay, they get a knock at the door, and it's Lester Likens. He had an ask around and finds out where his daughters were. I think it's quite a small town. I don't know how that came about, but he finds out anyway. Turns up at the door, and he basically starts talking to Gertrude and says, you know, we're finding it a little bit hard. It'd be a little bit easier if the girls weren't with us, you know. And Gertie just says, well, I've got 7 kids here of my own. You know, you're welcome to leave them here. Now, the film An American Crime, I'm going to try not to reference it too much, but just if you do go to watch it, it does only mention 6 children. I'm not too sure why, but she definitely had 7. So she says, I've got 7 of my own. 2 more aren't going to make a difference. I think it was for 12 weeks. And she says, if you pay me $20 a week, I'm sure we can, you know, I'm happy with that arrangement if you are. And he jumps at it. You know, in his opinion, him and his wife would get on much better if they didn't have the pressure of the kids around them. You know, great. But what he didn't do, he didn't take a look around the house. Now, Gertrude in this time, since getting divorced from John, she was quite a sickly woman. Now, it said she was, 5'6". She was only 37, but she only weighed about 100 pounds, which to us is about 7 stone. She's a very haggard woman, quite poorly, always on cough medicine. She's a very, very heavy smoker. And cleaning, housekeeping, wasn't for her, you know. So if he'd have actually had a look round this house, he'd have seen it was very... I don't think he'd have left his girls there, but who knows? You know, even in the kitchen, I think there was one bowl for them to split, a couple of saucers, 3 spoons. You know, she couldn't take care of the kids she had. Let's put it that way. You know, and this £20 a week, though, considering her rent was only £55 a month, you know, it should have made things better. So on July 4th, 1965, Sylvia and her sister Jenny move in with the Banaszewskis. And it was okay to begin with. You know, it said that Sylvia was quite happy and they listened to music and they all got on very well. And it was like a big slumber party. You know, it was all great. Until at the end of the first week when Lester Likens' check for $20 didn't turn up. Now, Betty was aware that her girls were there as well. Let me just say that. She did know they were there too, so it wasn't just him. But the check didn't turn up. So when they come home from school, Sylvia and Jenny, they walk in and it's not the normal lively house that they walk into, because as well as having 7 children, those 7 children, bar the baby, all have friends, all coming and going. It was kind of an open house. And when they came back from school, it was very quiet when they walked in. And Gertrude basically says to them, come on. And she takes them down to the basement. They're very confused. And it's only when they get down there, she says, your dad's check didn't turn up. And basically, her wording was, I've looked after you 2 little bitches for nothing. So, complete switch. Which was Gertrude all over, you know, switched very quickly. And she basically lifts the skirts, pulls their pants down, and she paddles the pair of them. I think it was said that she only paddled Jenny once and she fell to the floor. She couldn't take it. So Sylvia, being that protective older sister, says, I'll take hers. So she got paddled a couple of times. Sometimes it's said twice. Other sources said 15 times. But either way, they were paddled because their dad's check didn't turn up. It turned up the next day, though. You know. But they didn't get an apology or, you know, oh God, I'm sorry, girls. You know, none of that. But the check did turn up the next day. So, because she'd already laid hands on Sylvia, Gertrude, there was a jealousy of Sylvia, it said. Sylvia was very pure. She was very innocent. And Gertrude's oldest daughter, Paula, was not. She was 17 and she was pregnant. Now, again, like I say, this day and age, you know, everyone would help. Everyone would be around. They wouldn't, you know, look at the girl like she's an outcast. Back in the 60s, not so much. So Gertrude, in complete denial of Paula being pregnant, and obviously it must have been from that feeling of when she was a young girl and getting called those names. Just everything got projected onto Sylvia. That's all I can think of. Not that I'm excusing anything at all. I think when you haven't got that mindset, you try and think of anything you can to think, why would someone behave like that? So it seems like a lot was projected on Sylvia. So she just started to get a hatred for her. So at a church function, the one day, like I said, they didn't have a lot of money. They wasn't fed very well. Not just Sylvia and Jenny, all the kids. So when they went to a church function, Jenny was very hungry. So she probably ate a bit too much. People started to notice. Sylvia wasn't. She actually gave her a heads up and said, listen, slow it down, because the other kids were watching. The Banaszewski kids were watching. They turned into kind of little spies for Gertrude. This is how it had started to become. But of course, when they got home, Sylvia put Jenny to bed because she was tired. Come back down the stairs because all the kids from the area were there and they were playing music and stuff. And it all went silent when Sylvia walked in, and Gertrude was like, "Here's the piggy now." And she's looking, she's like, "What?" She goes, "I heard making a show of me." Because not only was virtuous, virtue so important to Gertrude, she liked to think she was very religious and above everything. So to her, to embarrass her in front of the church congregation was like a mortal sin. And she says, I'll give you something to eat. And she basically force-fed Sylvia this stale roll hot dog thing with mustard and ketchup on it. And when Sylvia couldn't swallow it because it was stale, and she vomited onto the kitchen floor. Now, I have told you about Gertrude's housekeeping skills. She made her eat her own vomit off the floor whilst beating her to do so, and said that there was grit from the dirty floor as well, which was causing her to heave as well. So this is where Sylvia's treatment was starting to, mistreatment should I say, was starting to escalate now. She just had just a disgust for her, and it's just so hard to know why. But she kind of took Sylvia aside after this episode, and she said, we'll wipe the slate clean and we'll start again, and just don't embarrass me, and just very confusing. So the one evening they're in the room and in the living room, and all the kids from around the street are there, and it's just an open house, and the boys had started obviously liking Sylvia, which Gertrude again very jealous of. I think whether it was for herself or she just wished her own girls were like that, I'm not too sure. But Sylvia made the grave mistake of admitting that she'd had a boyfriend in California when they were doing the carnival circuit. Now, she admitted that they'd kissed, but that was it. Sylvia genuinely was an innocent girl. And it was said that when she said this, Gertrude just exploded. Like, why would you do that? Why would you let someone touch you? You're going to have a baby. You're probably pregnant now. You are pregnant now. And in that split second, 5 seconds, it had gone from Sylvia admitting she kissed a boy once to she's pregnant. In front of everyone. Now, everyone was very used to Gertrude's switching, obviously including her own kids. But I think they were just relieved it wasn't at them. So they were kind of laughing. Found it quite funny. And in this escalation, Gertrude jumps out of her seat, knocks Sylvia off her chair, and just starts kicking her in her genital area over and over and over and over again. Just brute force for nothing. Calling her all the sluts known to man. It just so weird that's where it had escalated to. Well, Sylvia, when she was still going to school at this point, obviously she was sore going into school, but she never said anything. She was just a very timid girl. I'd be singing this from the rooftops. I'd pack mine and Jenny's stuff. We'd be out of there. And a lot of people are questioning this in the 55 years since it happened. But, this is who she was. And she didn't say anything. But she thought, I can't hurt Gertrude, but I'm going to go after your kids. So she started a rumour that Stephanie and Paula charged for sex. given how Gertrude was, you know, she's kind of like, party's like, yeah, but party's like, no. The rumour gets back to Paula and Stephanie. They find out who started the rumour. It's traced back. It came from Sylvia. Sylvia walks in from school and all hell breaks loose. Paula beats her so badly she breaks her wrist. Coy Hubbard, who is Stephanie's boyfriend, obviously not wanting people to think that his girlfriend's a slut, which she wasn't. You know, they weren't sleeping together or anything. You know, he screams at Sylvia. Gertrude's not happy about that. She's like, I thought you did judo. And watches while he starts throwing Sylvia around the room. Yeah, this is real. This happened. So she gets a severe beating for that. And Gertrude's not happy about it. And she says, you're the real slut. So to where she makes Sylvia insert a empty Coke bottle into herself in front of everyone. Sylvia did try. Obviously, she said no and everything else, but she was beaten so badly she was forced to do it. And Gertrude got involved because Sylvia was saying I can't. She got involved and she basically forced it, damaging Sylvia internally when she did it. So by this point, Sylvia's she's black and blue. She's in bits, this girl is. Now, from that injury, Sylvia becomes incontinent and she's wetting the beds upstairs. So Gertrude decides, you're an animal. You stay down in the basement, and they throw her. They don't bring her. They throw this girl into the basement. And that's basically where she stayed. Now, at this point, I think we are up to mid-September. So this is only, 7 weeks after she moved in, that she's now been banished to the basement for a lot of her day. You know, I think she was still going to school, but because the girls, Paula and Stephanie, had really laid down the dirt about her in school, saying she was a liar. You know, she was one to go off with boys. You know, they'd really laid stuff down about her. No one believed her. So when they seen her bruised, they just thought, oh, well, it's discipline. She deserves it. It's such a different time. I know when I'm talking to you, you're probably thinking, why was no one... It was such a different time back then. No one wanted to get involved. Everyone just wanted to mind their own business. Now, like I say, there was kids from the neighbourhood that were there when these things were happening to Sylvia. A couple of them told their parents, but it was very much, well, you know, that's their way of disciplining. I'm not getting involved. Just shocking. Now, by this point, neighbourhood kids were coming in and just taking turns on beating her. You know, she never tried to fight back, ever. I think that's the saddest part. I think if I'd have heard she was at least trying to fight back, but she never did. Now, Sylvia actually got stopped going to school when she'd asked Gertrude for a tracksuit that the school had told her she had to have. And Gertrude obviously said, absolutely not. So, not wanting to have the school come round and cause more trouble, she stole a tracksuit. Now, no one at the school actually finds out. I don't know whose tracksuit she stole, but whether they didn't notice at that point or it wasn't the school that found out. Gertrude found it in Sylvia's stuff. Obviously knew it wasn't hers. And that was it. She was like, I'll teach you what we do to thieves. And burnt every single one of Sylvia's fingers. beat her again. And from then, Sylvia never went to school again. And she was banished to the basement for a lot of times. The only time she really came up is when they would put her into just a hot, scalding bath and rub her wound with salt. At this point, there was people coming to the house. I think the parents they'd met up with the parents once, and she'd made an excuse, Gertrude had, for how thin Jenny and Sylvia were. Because don't forget, they weren't being... Now, Jenny wasn't getting the beatings Sylvia was getting. You might be wondering, well, what about her sister in all of this? She was just... I suppose she was just relieved it wasn't her. And that sounds really harsh, but that's what I got out of it. She was so scared. She was so frightened. And she just didn't want it happening to her. They did reach out to their older sister Diana at one point. She didn't really believe them. She thought they were exaggerating, Sylvia and Jenny. But when she received a letter from Jenny, she thought, that's a lot for a 14, 15-year-old girl to be making up. So she went round to the house. She found out where they lived, and she went round. And she knocked on very politely, and she said, I'm the girl's sister. I want to see them. And Gertrude just said, your dad's told me that I'm not allowed to let you see them, and until he agrees that, I can't let you see them. And she's like, well, why would he say that? And she's like, it's family business, nothing to do with me, and tells her to get off their property and closes the door. Now, Diana does call social services, who sends obviously someone round, but Gertrude manages to blag that as well. She shows Jenny well dressed, bathed, lovely, says that Sylvia has been out sleeping with married men. She's basically out whoring. But this one I'm looking after, but Sylvia, I don't know what to do with her. She's run away, she comes back, just basically a wayward teen. And social services walk away and close the case. She was down in the basement at that time. There was many chances to help her, there really was, but I think what you've got to take into account is just how manipulative Gertrude actually was. And she's got 7 children. I keep saying 7, obviously the baby can't speak, but the other 6 to speak for her. She had them saying the same things. Sylvia's just a troublemaker. She's upsetting our mum. She's calling us names, because obviously that rumour made it round the school, so that could be backed up. And no one was helping her. Now, at this point, even though the checks were still coming through for Sylvia and Jenny, Gertrude came up with the amazing plan of earning a bit more money. So what they would do, they would charge the neighbourhood kids to come in to beat Sylvia down in the basement. They used to call it having fun with Sylvia. And they used to punch her, kick her, burn her with cigarettes. Every single... Coy Hubbard would do all his judo moves, throwing her from one side of the basement to the other. Just everything you can think of. Plus not feeding her. This poor girl, she didn't have much more to give. There wasn't... She just didn't have anything else in her. On the one occasion she was brought up from the basement, Gertrude, again, just hating on her, but struggling to find reasons to beat her, because even through all this, she felt she needed a reason. It came to her, you branded my girls, I'm going to brand you. I'm going to brand you now. Now, this is part 1. Please join me for part 2, and I'll see you in a second.